The city skyline glittered like a necklace of diamonds, the night humming with life below. Yet atop the tallest penthouse, silence reigned. Adrian Montclair, the billionaire heir to a fortune that could buy nations, sat slouched in a velvet armchair, staring at the ceiling as if it held the answers to questions he had long stopped asking. His life was perfect on paper: private jets, exotic vacations, and boardrooms that trembled at his decisions. But in the quiet moments when the champagne flutes were empty and the laughter of party guests faded into memory, Adrian felt a hollow ache that not even gold or prestige could fill. He was lonely, desperately lonely, though he would never admit it to anyone. On that particularly cold evening, Adrian's housekeeper, a young black woman named Lila, knocked softly before entering his study. Her presence was unassuming, almost invisible, yet she carried a warmth that drew the eye without demanding attention. She had been working in his household for only a few months, yet there was a subtle intelligence in her eyes, a quiet resilience shaped by a life of unspoken struggles. Lila had dreams. Yes, but dreams that didn't involve mansions or glittering galas. Her life revolved around survival, her dignity, and occasional moments of fleeting happiness. Tonight, she held a small tray in her hands, balancing a modest cup of tea and a slice of lemon cake. Adrian glanced up, his sharp features softening just slightly at her timid smile. "You're late, Lila," he said without malice, more as a statement of fact than a reprimand. "I'm sorry, sir." Traffic was, she began, but then paused. Her gaze faltered as she looked into Adrian's deep, unreadable eyes. Something in them made her hesitate. She set the tray down on his desk, brushing her fingers against the polished surface nervously. "Sir," she whispered, almost as if speaking louder could break some invisible barrier between them, I need to ask you something." Adrian raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. Most requests were mundane: changing the arrangements for a dinner party, approving the shipment of some rare object, or handling a crisis with the household staff. Rarely did anyone dare to inject humanity into a conversation with him. "And what might that be?" he asked, leaning back and folding his hands, his interest piqued by the unusual tension in her voice. Lila took a deep breath, as though drawing courage from the very air around her. Her voice trembled, but it was steady enough to make him listen. $10, sir, could you be my husband for today?" The words fell like a sudden, jarring chord in the otherwise silent room. Adrian blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. A giggle threatened to escape his lips at the absurdity, but he suppressed it. "Excuse me." His tone was polite, but curiosity laced it like honey in bitter coffee. Lila's cheeks flushed a deep mahogany, and she avoided his gaze. I need to attend a family event. My cousin's wedding. And, the family there, they expect everyone to come with a spouse, even if it's just for a day. I don't have anyone, sir," and her voice faltered, cracking under the weight of her honesty. "I'm offering $10 just for the day. Would you?" Adrian felt an unexpected twist of amusement mixed with something else, a spark of interest, or maybe it was disbelief. The audacity of the request, the humility behind it, and the raw vulnerability she displayed stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years: intrigue. The room seemed to shrink around him as he studied her. Lila, standing there with her hands clasped nervously, looked smaller somehow, human in a way he had forgotten people could be. $10? He repeated, leaning forward, his sharp green eyes scanning her face as if trying to decode a riddle he could not yet solve. "For me to pretend to be your husband?" She nodded, barely moving, a faint hope flickering in her eyes. "Just for today. I promise, nothing else. You'll be paid, and you can leave after. I have no one else to ask." Adrian's lips curved into a half-smile, one that had never been coaxed by wealth, flattery, or business triumphs. Something in her desperation, her courage to ask, her honesty, it called to the part of him that had been abandoned long before he inherited his fortune. He considered it for a moment, the idea absurd and yet intoxicating. "Very well," he said, his voice smooth, almost teasing. $10 it is. But tell me, Lila, what exactly does a fake husband do at a wedding? Charm the relatives? Cry at the speeches? Lila's laughter was small, polite, but it carried relief, a tiny victory that Adrian had never imagined he would witness from someone so grounded. Just stand with me. Smile. Pretend to be happy. That's all. Please, sir. Adrian leaned back, his amusement turning into something warmer, more complex. The idea of spending the evening in a small human role, away from power, away from responsibility, away from the lonely perfection of his life, was oddly enticing. And yet he could not help but wonder, what would this woman, this maid with nothing but honesty and courage, see in him if they spent an entire evening together? Could she see the lonely man hiding behind the billionaire facade? Before he could answer, a thought struck him sharply, almost painfully. Perhaps, just perhaps, this ridiculous request was exactly what he needed. A chance to step out of his own gilded cage. A chance to feel something real. Very well, Lila, he said finally, a smile now genuine and warm. I will be your husband for today. Her eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and gratitude shining like fragile stars. Thank you, sir, she whispered, voice shaking slightly with emotion. You won't regret it. Adrian, for the first time in a long time, allowed himself to wonder, could he? The clock ticked on, the city lights flickering outside like tiny beacons of possibility, as a billionaire and a maid prepared to step into a world where money had no power and honesty courage, and a single day could change everything. The next morning dawned bright and promising, yet Adrian awoke with a strange mixture of anticipation and mild irritation. He had always prided himself on control. Control of his empire, control of the world around him. But today he was to be a pawn in someone else's life, a masquerade husband for a maid he barely knew. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The city sprawled below like a glittering kingdom, and for the first time in years, he considered a simpler life, one where laughter and unpredictability mattered more than quarterly profits. Meanwhile, Lila was a whirlwind of nervous energy, moving through her modest apartment with the precision of someone who lived a life dictated by strict schedules and careful planning. Her dress, a simple, elegant gown borrowed from her aunt, hung perfectly on her petite frame. She clutched the small $10 bill in her hand, a symbol of her audacity and of the strange, surreal arrangement she had secured with Adrien Montclair. Her heart raced, not just at the thought of attending the wedding, but at the knowledge that the man she would parade as her husband was a billionaire, a figure she had only ever seen in glossy magazines and news stories, now right at her side. The car ride to the wedding was oddly quiet. Adrian, for once, did not speak much, letting the city blur past in streaks of light and shadow. Lila, seated beside him, fidgeted with the edges of her gloves, stealing glances at him and wondering how to survive this charade without losing her dignity or her nerves. Finally, unable to bear the silence, she ventured a timid question. Sir, do you really have to act like a husband? Her voice was almost a whisper. I mean, just enough to convince my family, right? Adrian smirked, a rare, genuine curl of his lips that hinted at mischief. Convince your family? My dear Lila, convincing them is only half the fun. The real question is, can we survive their scrutiny without embarrassing ourselves or each other? Lila laughed softly, a sound like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was this laugh, fleeting but pure, that made Adrian turn and watch her, the way the corner of her lips quivered when she smiled. He realized then that the woman sitting beside him was entirely unpretentious, grounded in a reality so different from his own, yet compellingly magnetic. When they arrived at the venue, a sprawling countryside estate festooned with flowers and twinkling lights, Lila's anxiety spiked again. Her family was already gathered outside, laughing, embracing, exchanging pleasantries, all while casting occasional curious glances at the man beside her. Adrian, towering in his tailored tuxedo, exuded the sort of calm confidence that silenced whispers without effort. And yet Lila felt a pang of guilt and wonder all at once. Could she truly pretend for an entire evening? The moment they stepped into the crowd, Lila's cousin approached, her expression a mixture of delight and incredulity. Lila, You brought a husband?" she exclaimed, her eyes darting between Lila and Adrian as if trying to process a miracle. "And wow, he's tall." Adrian inclined his head politely, offering a practiced, charming smile. "I am honored to be here," he said smoothly, his voice like velvet. Lila watched in awe. He had never acted like this before anyone. She realized he was always commanding, always dominant, but here in this strange role, he was soft, patient, playful. The ceremony began, and Adrian found himself caught in the web of small talk, polite smiles, and the occasional curious gaze of Lila's relatives. He felt like an actor in a play he didn't rehearse for, yet strangely alive. And Lila, she thrived in the chaos, though her hands shook slightly when she clutched his arm during introductions. The irony wasn't lost on her. She, a maid who scrubbed floors and cooked meals, was standing beside a billionaire, her fake husband for the day, and pretending to belong to a world she had never imagined. As the evening progressed, laughter and music floated around them, blending with the scent of roses and polished wood. Adrian leaned closer at one point, his voice low and teasing. "Do you feel ridiculous yet, Lila?" She shook her head, trying to mask the blush rising in her cheeks. "A little, but I think I can manage." You, you make it easier," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the soft strains of the string quartet. He raised a brow. "Me? How do I make anything easier?" You listen," she said, simply, eyes meeting his. "You don't judge. You understand, even if just for today." Adrian was caught off guard. Few had ever looked at him that way. Not with expectation, not with acceptance, not with that rare spark of genuine connection. For a billionaire who owned empires, wielded influence, and controlled every aspect of his life, Lila's words struck like lightning. He felt a pull in his chest, a sudden warmth that was unfamiliar and unnerving, yet comforting. And then came the pivotal moment. A photograph was being taken, a group shot including all the cousins and extended family. Lila's hand found his almost instinctively, and he clasped it, the touch electric, grounding, stirring a mixture of exhilaration and anxiety in both of them. The camera clicked, and Lila's family erupted in laughter and chatter, oblivious to the subtle shift between the two of them. But Adrian noticed. Every glance, every shared smile, every accidental touch lingered longer than it should have, and an unfamiliar, intoxicating thought wormed its way into his mind. Perhaps pretending to be her husband for a day was no longer enough. Perhaps he wanted more. And yet the night was far from over. There would be dancing, confessions, and unexpected truths, moments that would test not just their acting skills, but the fragile, nascent connection forming between a lonely billionaire and a courageous, ambitious maid. As the first waltz began, Adrian felt a thrill of excitement and anxiety. Lila placed her hand in his, trusting him fully, and he led her onto the dance floor. Her laughter, light and airy, echoed in his ears, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt free. Could a single day, a pretense, a $10 agreement, really change the course of two lives forever? Or was it merely a fleeting escape, a temporary diversion from reality? Adrian did not have the answer yet, but as they danced beneath chandeliers casting soft golden light, something deep inside him whispered that tonight, something extraordinary was beginning. The night wore on, and the wedding celebration was in full swing. Music reverberated through the grand hall, laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses, and yet Adrian felt strangely apart from the revelry. He moved through the crowd like a shadow, polite and charming, yet always observing. Lila, on the other hand, was radiant, her nervous energy transformed into a kind of effortless grace as she navigated greetings, compliments, and the occasional teasing comment from her relatives. But amid the smiles and dances, Adrian sensed something deeper stirring within him, a pull he couldn't explain. He had spent decades mastering control over every aspect of his life, yet here, in a borrowed role, he was powerless to control the most dangerous element, his heart. Every glance at Lila, every accidental brush of her hand against his, sent a strange warmth crawling through him, confusing and exhilarating in equal measure. Lila noticed it too. She felt her pulse quicken, Each time, Adrian's gaze lingered longer than necessary, or when his hand steadied hers a little too firmly during the waltz. She was supposed to pretend he was her husband, nothing more, yet with each passing hour, pretending felt increasingly impossible. There was a magnetic pull between them, unspoken but undeniable, and neither could ignore it. Just as Lila laughed at a joke from one of her cousins, Adrian caught sight of a man leaning in the shadows of the grand hall, a familiar figure that made his chest tighten. It was Julian Cross, a rival businessman whose ambition and ruthlessness were notorious. Julian's eyes narrowed when he spotted Adrian. He didn't know Lila, didn't know why she was here, but the presence of Adrian Montclair at this small-town wedding was enough to set his mind racing with suspicion. Adrian stiffened, sensing the shift before Lila even noticed. "Stay close to me," he murmured, his voice low, almost a growl, laced with warning. Lila's hand found his again, and for a moment the world shrank to just the two of them. But Julian's approach was deliberate, slow, and calculated. The subtle tension in the room thickened, a storm waiting to break. Meanwhile, Lila's family was oblivious to the silent battle unfolding nearby, engrossed in conversation, champagne, and shared memories. But Adrian's instincts, honed by decades of business and power struggles, were razor-sharp. He subtly positioned himself between Julian and Lila, a silent shield, a warning to anyone who dared approach too closely. "Sir, what is happening?" Lila whispered, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Nothing," Adrian replied smoothly, masking the protective surge that threatened to reveal itself. "Just keep smiling." His tone was calm, but his eyes never left Julian, who now circled like a predator sizing up prey. Lila nodded, her fingers tightening around his, finding reassurance in the touch that was growing warmer, more intimate with every passing second. As the evening progressed, Lila excused herself for a moment to freshen up. Adrian's attention wavered for the first time, anxiety creeping in as he watched her disappear around the corner. The emptiness she left behind was startling. More than just physical space, it was an emotional void, a reminder of how much her presence had begun to mean to him. And then a question struck him sharply. Could he really return to his lonely existence after tonight, knowing that someone like Lila existed in the world, someone who could make him feel alive again? Meanwhile, Lila paused in the powder room, staring at her reflection. Her heart raced, not just from the event, but from the closeness she felt with Adrian. Pretending to have a husband had seemed simple, trivial even, but the truth was far more complicated. Her chest tightened as she realized that pretending might no longer be an option. She wondered, did he feel it too, or was it just her imagination? Returning to the ballroom, she found Adrian still standing near the center of the hall, his posture composed, but the tension in his shoulders unmistakable. Their eyes met, and a quiet understanding passed between them, a shared acknowledgement of something neither could yet name. Suddenly, a small mishap sent a tray of drinks crashing to the floor. Guests gasped, laughter erupted, and chaos briefly reigned. Adrian moved instinctively, shielding Lila from the spray and awkward stares. Their hands brushed again, lingering longer this time, and a shiver ran up Lila's spine. It was in that fleeting contact, in that split second of shared chaos, that Adrian realized he was no longer merely acting. The feelings he had tried to suppress, curiosity, attraction, even a strange sense of protectiveness, were real. And Lila, for her part, was caught in the same web, feeling an intoxicating mix of fear, excitement, and longing. As the night drew on, a slow, haunting song began to play, a waltz of longing, of unspoken confessions. Adrian offered his hand, and Lila, almost instinctively, accepted. They danced in silence, the world around them fading into a blur. Her head rested lightly against his chest, and he felt the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, an anchor in a life that had long been adrift. And in that moment, a question lingered, not just for them, but for anyone witnessing the connection forming. Have you ever met someone who changes your life in a single day, someone who makes everything else fade away? If you have, comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Little did they know, the storm was only beginning. Julian's intentions were far from innocent, and the fragile bubble of trust and connection between Adrian and Lila would soon be tested in ways neither could anticipate. Secrets from the past, ambitions from the present, and desires for the future were all poised to collide, threatening not just the masquerade, but the real emotions that had started to blossom between a lonely billionaire and a brave, hopeful maid. As they danced, Adrian allowed himself a rare thought, almost reckless in its honesty. Perhaps this isn't just pretending. Perhaps she is exactly what I've been searching for, even if I didn't know it existed. And Lila, feeling the warmth of his hand and the subtle strength in his hold, dared to believe that perhaps for the first time in her life, someone truly saw her. Not the maid, not the pretender, but the real Lila. The night had only just begun, but the first seeds of change, trust, and desire had been planted, and neither would be able to ignore them for long. The reception hall was alive with music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Yet Adrian felt a storm brewing beneath the surface. He had prided himself on control of his company's his life, his image, but tonight, at this wedding, the illusion of control was slipping through his fingers like sand. He watched Lila laughing with her cousins, radiant in her simple elegance, and for the first time, he felt the gnawing ache of vulnerability. The moment was fleeting. Across the hall, Julian Cross had made his move. With a calculated smile, he approached Lila's family under the pretense of polite conversation. Adrian's sharp instincts immediately detected the threat, subtle as it was. Julian didn't know Lila personally, yet his eyes lingered on her with an intensity that made Adrian's chest tighten. Every muscle in his body went on alert, and for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long while, genuine concern for another human being. Lila, unaware of the quiet tension building behind her, felt a pang of unease as she noticed Adrian stepping slightly closer, his jaw tight, a protective shadow settling over him. She opened her mouth to ask, but the words caught in her throat. Their fingers brushed again, a grounding gesture in the midst of chaos, and she felt a warmth spreading from her chest, confusing and thrilling all at once. "Sir, is everything okay?" she whispered as he leaned closer, his voice low and steady, almost a secret meant only for her. "Yes," Adrian replied, though his eyes never left Julian. "Just enjoy the evening. Let me handle the rest." Lila nodded, though her pulse quickened. She had never seen a man so composed yet so alert, so in command of a situation that was completely outside the world he normally controlled. The realization stirred something in her, a mixture of admiration, intrigue, and something far more dangerous, the hint of attraction. But then came the disruption. One of Lila's younger cousins, excited and slightly clumsy from sugar and champagne, tripped near the dessert table, sending a cascade of drinks spilling across the floor. Guests gasped, laughter erupted, and Julian seized the opportunity to step closer, offering a seemingly innocent hand to Lila. Adrian's reaction was instant. He moved between Julian and Lila, his presence commanding, eyes flashing with an intensity that made Julian falter for just a second. Lila noticed the protective aura surrounding him, the subtle possessiveness that had no place in a casual charade. Her heart thudded violently in her chest, a mixture of fear and something dangerously akin to hope. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what I'd do without you." Adrian's gaze softened, though only briefly, and a tension he hadn't admitted to himself began to unravel. "You don't have to worry, Lila," he said quietly. "Not tonight." Yet the night had other plans. Later, during a quiet moment near the balcony, Lila felt a hand on her shoulder, a gentle, tentative gesture. She turned, startled, and found Adrian's gaze searching hers, his expression unreadable yet deeply intense. "Lila, may I be honest?" he asked, his voice unusually vulnerable. She nodded, heart pounding. "Of course. I didn't think I would feel anything tonight. I thought this would be a simple charade, pretending to be your husband for a few hours." But he hesitated, and for the first time, Adrian Montclair allowed uncertainty to enter his world. "But being near you, seeing you laugh, feeling your hand in mine. I realize I'm not pretending anymore, and that scares me. Lila's breath caught. Her own emotions mirrored his confusion, excitement, and a fragile hope. I? I feel the same, she admitted softly. I never thought this would matter. But it does. Before Adrian could respond, Julian reappeared, his smile sharp, almost predatory. Adrian Montclair, he said smoothly, voice loud enough to carry, I didn't expect to see you here. Quite the interesting company you keep, isn't it? Adrian's jaw tightened. Julian, he said coldly, I suggest you step away. Julian's smirk deepened. Or what? Are you pretending to be someone you're not? Perhaps this little charade is more revealing than you realize. Lila felt a chill run down her spine. For the first time, the pretense of the evening felt dangerously fragile. Julian's words weren't just a threat. They were a reminder that Adrian's world and hers were from entirely different planets, and tonight's masquerade could crumble at any second. Adrian, sensing Lila's unease, took a protective step closer, lowering his voice. Ignore him, he whispered. He won't ruin this night for you. But the warning came too late. Julian's veiled implication had struck a nerve, and Lila's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of frustration at the impossibility of her situation. She had wanted a simple evening of borrowed happiness, and instead she had stumbled into a storm she hadn't anticipated. Adrian noticed the tears instantly. Without thinking, he reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Hey, he murmured, voice soft but firm, don't cry. Not tonight. Not for him. Lila blinked up at him, her heart aching and swelling at once. Here was a man she barely knew, yet he radiated strength and care in a way that made her knees weak. I don't want to ruin this for you, she whispered. You're not ruining anything, Adrian replied, voice steady but filled with emotion. If anything, you're making me realize what I've been missing all my life. And if that scares you, good. It scares me too. For a fleeting moment, the world stopped. Music, laughter, threats all faded into the background. Only the two of them remained, hearts racing, emotions raw and unfiltered. Lila realized she was no longer just pretending, and Adrian realized that he wanted to protect her. Not for money, not for appearances, but for something far more real and dangerous. Love. But outside, Julian's eyes lingered. He had seen the connection, understood the danger, and was already plotting his next move. The masquerade had transformed into something unpredictable, a night filled with fragile truths and hidden desires. And neither Adrian nor Lila could foresee how deeply it would affect the rest of their lives. The wedding night had reached its crescendo. Guests swirled around in laughter and music, yet in one secluded corner of the grand estate, the tension between Adrian and Julian reached a dangerous pitch. Lila clutched her glass of champagne, her heart still pounding from the evening's events. She had tried to keep the charade light, but the emotions now raging between her and Adrian were no longer pretend. She could feel the electric pull of desire and protection radiating from him, and it both thrilled and terrified her. Adrian, standing with his back slightly turned toward the hall, watched Julian carefully. Every instinct honed from years of business battles screamed at him that this man was more than just a rival. He was a threat, not only to Adrian's pride, but to the fragile bond forming with Lila. He had promised to protect her tonight, and he would keep that promise no matter the cost. Julian stepped closer, his smirk growing sharper. I see you've grown fond of her, he said, his voice smooth but laced with mockery. Do you think Maid is worthy of your attention, Montclair? Adrian's jaw tightened. Stay away from her, he warned, his tone low but lethal. Tonight is hers, and you have no place here. Julian laughed lightly, a sound dripping with menace. I think you'll find that the world doesn't care about feelings, Adrian, and neither does she. If she knew who you really were, would she even want you? Adrian froze slightly, the words hitting deeper than Julian intended. Could it be true? What if Lila's perception of him was based on the man she thought he was for this charade, just a pretend husband, and not the billionaire whose life she had never touched? The thought sent a cold pang through him, a fear of losing something before it had even begun. Lila, sensing the tension, stepped forward. "Julian, stop," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear fluttering in her chest. "This isn't about you. Leave us alone." Julian smirked, his eyes flicking toward Adrian with a mixture of amusement and challenge. "You think she'll be loyal to you once the truth comes out?" he taunted. Adrian's gaze shifted to Lila, his green eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt or fear. He realized then that she already had the courage to face whatever came her way, and he admired her fiercely for it. "Lila, trust me," he said quietly. "Whatever happens tonight, we'll handle it together." And then the moment came. Lila's aunt, mistaking Adrian for a genuine family guest, congratulated him warmly and casually mentioned that Lila had always been a strong, independent woman. In the same breath, she asked, "And your career, young man? What do you do for a living?" Adrian froze slightly, knowing the lie could unravel everything. Lila looked at him nervously, unsure how he would respond. With a wry smile, Adrian decided to reveal the truth, but carefully, in a way that allowed Lila's courage to shine. "I'm not quite who you think I am," he began, his voice steady. "I'm Adrian Montclair. I own companies, I live in the city, and I'm the person who has been pretending to be your husband for today." The room fell silent. Lila's eyes widened not in shock, but in disbelief and awe. She had known he was wealthy, yes, but the enormity of his world was staggering, and yet he had chosen to spend this evening with her, protecting her, laughing with her, dancing with her, as if nothing else mattered. You're a billionaire," she whispered, voice trembling but filled with wonder. "Yes," Adrian replied softly, "but tonight, I don't care about money or titles or power. Tonight, I care about you." Lila's chest tightened, emotions crashing over her. She had come tonight expecting a borrowed happiness, a temporary escape, and instead, she had found something real, something she had never dared to hope for. "Adrian, Before she could finish, Julian's smirk twisted into fury. "You've made your choice," he sneered, "but don't think for a second that this ends here." Adrian's eyes flared. "I don't care what you think. You've never had a claim to anything here, Julian. This isn't your world. It never was." Lila, emboldened by Adrian's strength and the truth between them, stepped closer. "And he's mine," she said firmly. "Tonight, I don't care about who you are or what you think. This is my choice, and I choose him." The declaration left Julian momentarily speechless. Adrian, sensing victory not through wealth, but through love and courage, relaxed slightly. For the first time tonight, he felt the exhilaration of being fully alive, fully present, fully human. Not just a billionaire playing a role. As the music swelled and the wedding continued around them, Adrian and Lila shared a quiet smile, a silent acknowledgement of what had passed and what was possible. Masks had fallen, secrets revealed, and hearts laid bare. They had survived the chaos, and in doing so, had discovered a connection neither had expected but both had secretly hoped for. And in that quiet moment, Adrian whispered, almost to himself, perhaps pretending for a day wasn't pretending at all. "Perhaps it was the only way I could find you." Lila's hand found his, gripping it tightly. "And perhaps it was the only way I could find myself, and you," she replied, voice filled with emotion. The storm had passed. Julian had retreated, defeated by the unexpected strength of love and courage. But Adrian and Lila knew this was only the beginning. A beginning filled with promise, with challenges, and with the possibility of a love that had started in the most unexpected way. The wedding night was winding down, the last notes of music drifting through the grand hall as guests began to depart. Lila stood on the balcony, wrapped in the soft glow of moonlight, her heart still pounding from the evening's revelations. The city stretched out below like a sea of stars, glittering and infinite, yet in that moment, all she could see was Adrian. He stepped onto the balcony, quietly, the moonlight casting a halo around him, highlighting the sharp contours of his face softened by vulnerability. The tension from earlier confrontations had melted, replaced with a calm, yet powerful presence that seemed to anchor her very being. "You stayed. Lila whispered, a mixture of relief and disbelief in her voice. I promised I would, Adrian replied, voice deep and steady, yet carrying a softness that made her heart ache. And I always keep my promises. Lila turned to face him fully, taking in the subtle warmth in his eyes, a stark contrast to the cold, untouchable persona the world knew. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Tonight was supposed to be pretend, a temporary escape, but it's become so much more than that. Adrian closed the distance between them slowly, deliberately, as if each step was measured by his newfound awareness of her importance. It has, he agreed, and it's not pretend anymore. What I feel for you, it's real, Lila. Not for the charade, not for appearances, not for anything except you. Lila's chest swelled with a mixture of joy and fear. She had never imagined that a billionaire, someone from a world so distant from her own, could care so deeply. Yet here he was, standing before her, unmasked, vulnerable, and entirely sincere. I feel the same, she said softly, her hands trembling as they reached for his. I never wanted this to end when it was supposed to be temporary, but now, I don't want it to end at all. Adrian's lips curved into a gentle smile, and he took her hands in his. Then it won't end, he said firmly, his voice resolute. It's just the beginning. I want to know every part of you, Lila, and I want you to know every part of me. A soft breeze danced around them, carrying the scent of flowers from the garden below. Lila felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming surge of emotion that came from being truly seen, truly valued. I never thought I'd find someone who understands me, she whispered. You've always been seen, Adrian said, brushing the tear gently away. I just finally noticed. For a long moment, they stood there, hands entwined, hearts beating in synchrony. The world beyond the balcony, wealth, status, judgment, faded into insignificance. For the first time in their lives, both felt a rare, liberating truth that love could exist in unexpected places between people who seemed worlds apart, yet whose souls had always been searching for one another. Adrian leaned closer, his forehead resting lightly against hers. Lila, I don't care about titles or money anymore. All I care about is you, and every day I get to spend with you from now on. Her lips curved into a soft, tearful smile. And I don't care about your money or your world, Adrian. I care about you. That's all that matters. They kissed then, gently at first, savoring the moment, the culmination of a night filled with laughter, fear, vulnerability, and unspoken truths. It was a kiss that sealed not just the end of a masquerade, but the beginning of a real, lasting love. As they pulled back slightly, Adrian chuckled softly. I never imagined a $10 request could change my life, he murmured, eyes sparkling with amusement and affection. Lila laughed, the sound light and full of genuine joy. And I never imagined a billionaire would agree to be my husband for a day. Yet here we are. The city lights twinkled below like a promise of endless possibilities. They stood together, shoulders touching, hearts aligned, knowing that life would have challenges. But for the first time, they would face them together, not as master and servant, not as charade partners, but as equals, as lovers, as companions who had found each other against all odds. Adrian lifted her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to it. Tonight taught me something important, he said softly. That love doesn't follow rules, doesn't care about money or status. It finds you, even when you least expect it. And I found you, Lila. I found you. Tears of joy filled Lila's eyes as she whispered, and I found you too, Adrian, the real you. The moon hung high above, a witness to the improbable love story that had begun with a simple, audacious request, $10 and a borrowed husband. Yet it had grown into something real, enduring, and life-changing, a love that neither wealth nor pretense could ever overshadow. And as they stood together on that balcony, hearts beating as one, both Adrian and Lila knew that life would never be the same again. What had begun as a fleeting masquerade had transformed into a love that would last a lifetime. They didn't need pretend anymore. They had each other, and that was enough. The moon hung high above the city, casting silver light over the balcony where Lila and Adrian stood hand in hand, the soft hum of distant traffic and the faint echo of the wedding music below blending into a serene backdrop. And for the first time, the pretense of the day felt entirely gone, leaving only the raw, unfiltered truth of their connection. And Lila's heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at Adrian, the man who had come into her life in the most unexpected way, first as a borrowed husband for a day, and now as someone who had irrevocably changed the course of her world. And she felt a mixture of awe and vulnerability as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, telling him that this charade, this temporary arrangement, had grown into something she could no longer ignore, a love she hadn't anticipated but could no longer deny. And Adrian's gaze softened immediately, his green eyes full of warmth and sincerity, as he pulled her slightly closer, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear and speaking softly, but with the authority of someone who had finally realized what truly mattered in life, telling her that he had never imagined a day like this would happen, that a simple act meant to entertain or amuse could lead him to the one person he had been unknowingly searching for all his life, and that he didn't care about wealth, status, or appearances anymore, that all he cared about was her, and he wanted to start a real life together with her. Life bound not by pretenses or societal expectations, but by love, trust, and shared dreams. And Lila's eyes filled with tears, her lips curving into a trembling smile as the weight of her emotions poured through her in relief, joy, and the rare, intoxicating thrill of being seen completely by someone she had only just begun to know. And she nodded, barely able to find her voice, whispering that she felt the same, that she never wanted to go back to the days before she had known him, before she had felt the safety, respect, and desire in his presence. And Adrian, feeling her certainty, let out a relieved laugh that was part joy and part disbelief at the turn their lives had taken. And then he took both her hands in his, pressing them to his chest so she could feel the steady beat of his heart, and said, simply, that if she was ready, he wanted to make their love official, to step out of the charade and into a real, committed, lifelong partnership. And Lila, overcome with happiness and courage, nodded emphatically, telling him yes, that she wanted that too, that she wanted them to truly be together as equals, as partners, and as a married couple whose bond would never be shaken. And Adrian smiled, brushing a gentle kiss over her knuckles, feeling the warmth of her skin against his and the depth of her trust in him. And together, they looked out over the city lights shimmering below, the night air cool and fragrant with flowers from the garden, and they imagined a future filled with laughter, love, challenges faced together, and a world in which their connection was no longer a secret or a pretense, but a radiant, undeniable truth. And in that shared silence, they both knew that everything that had happened, the fear, the masquerade, the tension, the misunderstandings, had led them to this moment, a moment where love triumphed over circumstance, over wealth, over class, over pretenses, and as they embraced under the moonlight, hearts beating as one, they silently promised that their real life, their real marriage would begin now, and that nothing could ever undo the extraordinary, improbable love that had started with a single audacious request and ended in a lifetime of togetherness.